Thank you so much for having me, Carlos. And Keith, again, echoing Danny's words, thanks you so much for the coordination of the delegation. It was an absolute privilege and delight to be invited and to be able to come to China. I don't know if any of them are watching, but I would also like to thank our Chinese hosts and comrades who accommodated us so well and so amazingly during the course of our trip there. I couldn't have imagined sort of a smoother and more efficient trip. And I think in that sort of spirit in itself was what I saw very much elevated in China. It's that hospitality, it's that efficiency, it's that just the sheer power of human beings having people to people exchanges and working together in a world that is rife with just so much despair and destruction. Coming back to China for the first time since 2019, so pre-pandemic times, it really was a balm to my soul, especially coming from Britain at the time, where it was just a pit of despair for everyone involved, for workers, for people witnessing the genocide in Gaza, and just the general state of affairs and lack of faith in our politicians, our government, I guess. And so going to China, it was a timely reminder for me, and I think for most people in the delegation, that the future of the world, the future of humanity, does lie within the global south. A society that I myself have become acclimated to in living in the imperial core is simply not a fair or accurate representation of what the world can be or what the world has to be. In fact, on my very first day in the country, when we were in Beijing, we visited the 12345 call center. I know this was a very popular destination for a lot of us in the delegation because of just how incredible it was. And I was personally just blown away by the efficiency. So the 12345 call center is, well, as the name suggests, it is a call center and they take calls from citizens all around Beijing, so from all around the different districts. And at the time we were visiting, I made a note of this because I just thought it was incredible. At 9:51 a.m., they had already taken 12,072 calls from citizens across Beijing. And this is in scope of them taking up to 65,000 calls a day. So within that morning alone, according to the data, they'd already found like 2,000 resolutions for some of the problems that had been raised, another 4,000 referrals, and I think it was like a 7-day turnaround for resolutions. So even for people who can't get a resolution straight away, they have like a 7-day time limit of when they're meant to turn around and get you referred to a specific political bureau or department to sort out whatever problem they had. So these problems, it wasn't necessarily just, um, it wasn't like an emergency line. It was a line for everyday problems. So, if a community was suffering because their water had been cut off or there was no gas, or, someone was finding that there was a really noisy neighbor that they didn't know what to do anything about, or they just needed a bit of help getting around the city or getting access to services they weren't sure were available. They would call into the service, and this would all be noted as part of a very centralized system. And things such as, it was used technology, big technology, I guess, was used to serve the people. And I just found that such a stark contrast to how technology and AI and things can be seen, particularly in the West, because we all know that they are used to subjugate the worker and used to, facilitate things like mass unemployment and surveillance culture and things like that. So to see how it was utilized in China to serve the people, to ensure projects such as, getting a shelter for the elderly to be able to come and commune together, to come and have meals together, to kickstart projects where, the local people would be able to have a better say in their governments based on the feedback that they gave to 12345 Center. It was just absolutely mind blowing. And again, it's a spirit that you see throughout China. I thought before coming to China that my understanding of Xi Jinping thought was fairly robust. But what I didn't realize was the sheer mass support that the philosophy has throughout all of the peoples, from sort of the grassroots to the officials to the students in academia. Xi Jinping thought is taken so incredibly seriously and is deeply embedded in Chinese politics and how the country is governed. It's based on, for those of you who don't know, it is essentially a philosophy based on fairness and justice, on joint consultation, on the end of sort of class conflict and the abundance and transcendence of international theory. that last line I took from an academic who spoke, and he was speaking on the commitment of internationalism and how important that was to socialism with Chinese characteristics, and how Xi Jinping thought was a crucial and essential part of achieving that within China. It is based on a people-centered logic, seeking to remove the expansionist nature, and off the back of seeing that Western modernization simply did not work and will not work for a country like China. And I just found it, again, so incredibly fascinating to see how a philosophy, the study of Xi Jinping thought was really embedded into the practice of how China was governed, how China was run. And it was in every, I think, in every arena of life that we managed to visit and learn about. We saw how the core tenets of Xi Jinping thought were essentially ingrained into the very fabric of the organization, and the sort of mass line and the people to people approach that was being taken, not just on a local provincial level, but on international level as well. There was a real dedication to ensuring that there was a sort of win-win cooperation, as we always hear in the media. But it's true, it truly is based on a win-win level of cooperation. And we were just so lucky to be able to visit provinces like Zhejiang and Jilin, where we learned even more about how that was embedded on a community level. We saw how there were community centers that I find just amazing and unthought of here, where, there's floors dedicated to health and well-being. There's floors dedicated to, calligraphy for the elderly and hobbies for the retired. That there was like gym facilities, kitchen facilities, a whole floor dedicated to children, with children's rooms, and where they would take suggestions from children using the centers on how they could improve and how they could be more friendly and accommodating to the local community's children. And so it was just amazing, really, to see how this is on a practical level, how this improves the lives of the everyday people in following the philosophy of Xi Jinping thought, and of course socialism with Chinese characteristics. And it had the effect of helping me to reflect on a lot of things about this country, essentially about the imperial core and where we live in the West. And that's just the amount of nihilism we experience. And where in the West, I feel there is a lot of nihilism in things like climate change, that there is a despair that we will never recover from the from the well from the horrific trajectory towards a mass extinction event that seems to be that we are 30 seconds to midnight on the doomsday clock. Where there is that nihilism, I see in China something in complete contrast. I see Chinese scientists working day and night exploring the possibilities of nuclear fusion and artificial sun, where civil servants lead the charge against deforestation, and the world's largest solar power plant literally went online just last week in China. In the West, we are in election season. We are seeing that election season is giving rise to the worst in humanity, I would argue, where politicians are fighting over scraps, fighting over the scraps they think they can give to people, that they're promising to give to people, but may never see the light of day. And where there is that skepticism of, having a government that isn't a corrupt government, that isn't completely overshadowed by power, by billionaires in our cabinet, I see the coordination of millions of Chinese officials and millions more party members in building a shared vision of socialism with Chinese characteristics that begins in the grassroots. And of course, where we see there is such a culture of discontent that the UK is just America's lapdog, especially in the events of Palestine. In China, I see a pride in a country that puts its sovereignty first, whilst acknowledging that it cannot solve its problems by itself. I recall another PhD student we met speaking so passionately about how there was genocide and torture happening in all corners of the world. But because of that, it's only so much more important that China is contributing to a better world through its leadership, whether it's peace talks and partnerships with the global south, or projects such as the Belt and Roads, encouraging countries to break away from the yokes of imperialism and unipolarity. I just want to, I guess, end by emphasizing that this was obviously just a very whistle-stop tour of my experience in China. But the one resounding thing I take away is that China is still a developing country. It is a country governing 1.4 billion people. It has millions of party members striving to make it the best possible country it can be within the context of the Cold War in China, within the context of global imperialism and Western hegemony. And China, for all that is doing good, it also does not need to be the model of perfection for us in the imperial core or in the diaspora to be able to support its endeavors for a better world. China only needs to continue following the path it is currently on and the path that has been shown to be successful, because it is creating a better world at the end of the day. It is undeniable. And it's doing so for its people, hand in hand with the progressive and anti-imperialist governments and leaderships in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Vietnam, Burkina Faso, Senegal. And all we can do from the imperial core truly is watch and learn, which is why I feel it was so important for this delegation to have happened. And I feel so blessed to have been part of it and to see firsthand. And I encourage everyone who has not been to China, who still has these misconceptions about China and the way that it's governed, to go and see for yourself. Go on holiday there. Go and visit any province, and you will see just how far it has come in the past 2 decades alone. And here in the West, the lesson we must take is that we must strive to mobilize even a fraction of the revolutionary power we see in the peoples of China. And no matter how impossible it must seem, we must maintain the spirit of revolutionary optimism, and we must strive to create a society that meets even a fraction of the one that is evoked in China and across the global South. That is the only way forward. And that's the end of my contribution. Thank you so much again to Friends of Socialist China for platforming me, and I really look forward to reading your comments and questions and hearing from my fellow delegates. Thank you.